Okay, Lewin three-step change model consists of 3 steps. The first step is unfreezing, a second is change of movement, and then refreezing. So this unfreezing, movement, and refreezing, we can imagine like change is like a ice cube, or the shape of the ice cube. So in order to change the shapes of the ice cube, you have to unfreeze the ice cube. If the frozen ice cube, you cannot change it. The shape is become permanent. So in order to change, you have to unfreeze. You have to melt this ice cube. So first step is unfreezing. So if we want to refer to our problems, for example, in the organization, we're having a problem. So consider that problem as a status quo or something that you are comfortable with. It is something that you do not want to change because you consider change as a threat to your status quo, to your enjoyable states. So but it is a problem. So unfreezing is kind of you need to move from this stage, so you have to unfreeze. So if we want to exemplify on ice cube, this ice cube, the frozen ice cube, need to be unfreeze. So after unfreeze, then the ice cube can be changed into any shape that you want. So if we want to refer to the problem, so the change of the problem into beta is like the movements to the new states. So this new states is kind of, we consider is a movement as a present state is like a status quo or your comfort zone, whatever. It is something not so desirable, but you have to change it into desirable states. Normally, it's very difficult to move from here to here, but if you move, that means you'll be able to unfreeze your status quo, moving toward a new state. So here, movement in the second level, in the second stage. So next, you have to make this change permanent. If you didn't make the change permanent, it will go back to the problem, to the original stage. So it is important to freeze or to froze. How to say it, to make your change permanent. So you have to refreeze. So refreezing the new change, that's the change that you have done here, need to make it permanent. So the step that's processing the the change into permanent is called refreezing. So this stage, from frozen stage to the desirable stage, is happen at these parts when you move from undesirable state to desirable states, and then you have to make these desirable states of change as permanent. So you need to refreeze. So imagine as an ice cube. In order to change the shape of the ice cube, you have to melt it first. You have to refreeze first, and then after you refreeze, you make a change to that your status quo, to the ice cube, and then it's become like a liquids ice, and then you can refreeze in order to make it permanent by refreeze based on whatever shape that you want. So unfreezing the status quo, if we want to explain in a little bit detail, the unfreezing of the status quo, start with the driving force. You need to have the driving force. You need to admit that you need to change because of the problem. So there's a driving force that comes directly from you. So driving force which direct behavior away from the status quo need to be increased in order to change. So however, even though you have the driving force is high, but sometimes your restraining force to change is also high. So restraining force can hinder movement from the existing equilibriums. This restraining force need to be decreased. If it is increased, then it will difficult to change. So I show you this slide. So when we talk about driving force, we talk about restraining force. So the driving force must be bigger than the restraining force. If this one bigger, this one could overturn this one, or this one could counteract this one. So if this driving force is similar in magnitudes, then restraining force, then the change will not happen. So If like this, for example, driving force is similar in magnitude as restraining force, then the change become initial. That means there's no change because the forces coming from above are fighting among each other and they are equal in balance, so no one win. But if the driving forces are high, that means this one is stronger in terms of power, so this one could beat these restraining forces, then change will happen. So if restraining forces are bigger or are stronger than driving forces, change will not happen because restraining forces will restrain the change from happen. So if driving forces is stronger, then driving forces will drive the change and then be able to beat these restraining forces. So that's how change been explained in terms of driving forces and restraining forces. The third one is when the change has been implemented. So let's say driving forces be able to beat restraining forces, so change will happen. At this stage, change will happen. In order to make sure that change is permanent, so it is need to be refrozen. So that it will be sustained over time. So unless this refrozen is taken place, there will be a very high chance that the change will be short-lived. That means it go back to the problem that in the beginning exists. So the employee will attempt to revert to the previous equilibrium stage. That means the employees, if didn't been refrozen the change, it will go back to the present state, to their status quo. Change is just a short lived. It's not going to have effects. So it is important to refreeze the change. So the objective of refreezing is to stabilize the new situations. That means the change that just taken place by balancing the driving and restraining forces, by increasing the driving and also reducing the restraining forces. So that's what we want. We do not want this one, because if this one, the change is initial. So this is the slide that given in the textbook. So restraining forces, normally if we want to move to the desired states from our status quo is a present state that are not desirable. So this one, if we want to move into desirable states, normally there will be restraining forces. There will be evil forces that will try to persuade us to go back to the status quo. That's why it's showing here restraining forces push the change going down, so that the change will not happen. Driving forces is kind of push this change in order to go to the desirable states. So if the driving forces is stronger, then it could beat the restraining forces, so it could move to the desirable states. And at this stage, the change need to be refrozen. If not, it will go back to the status quo. That's important to stabilize the change that's just been done, so that it will be sustained, it will be permanent. So next theory just now is by Lewin forces theory. And then we move to the Coulter 8-step plan for implementing change. For Coulter, he come up with us 8 steps. For example, first need to establish a sense of urgency, so that a change can be explain why change is needed, and then form a coalitions with enough power that lead to change. That's mean having more driving forces, so that the change could be done, and then create a new visions to direct the change, and strategies for achieving the visions that's been the visions, and then communicate the vision throughout the organizations, and then empower others to act on the visions by removing barriers to change. And then plans for creates and reward short-term win so that it will become permanent. So consolidate improvement, reassess change, and make necessary adjustment and reinforce the change. So this is quite long. It's kind of detailed compared to the other 3-4 steps. So John Cotter creates a more detailed approach for implementing change. So began by listing common mistakes managers make when trying to initiate change. So this is considered as a more detailed compared to the 3 forces. The third one is action research. This also considered as one approach to managing organizational change. So action research is a change process based on the systematic collection of data and selection of the change action based on what the analyzed data indicated. So this change action is like a problem solving steps. Start with diagnosing the problems, whether the problem exists or not, so whether we need to make a change or not. So this process will determine whether the change is needed or not. So in order to determine, is need to collect the data. So first we start with analyze the data, systematic collection data. So here analysis is kind of the data is collected and analyzed. And then after analyze, giving a feedback based on the data, result of the data, and then after giving a feedbacks, action need to be taken so that could be able to deal with the feedbacks. And then evaluations whether the actions or the evaluations, the feedback actually good or not. So this action research provide at least 2 specific benefits. First is problem focus, and second is could reduce resistance to change. So problem focus whereby change agent objectively look for the problems, and the type of the problems determine the type of the change action. So problem focus is start with try to look for the problems, whether problem exists or not, what type of the problems, and the type of the problem will determine what actions here need to be taken. So second benefits is to reduce resistance to change. If could reduce resistance to change, and then change could be implemented easily and consistently. So once employee have actively participate in the feedbacks, here the feedbacks process where employees also participate, not only manager but employee and manager participate in the feedbacks. If employees actively participate in the feedback stage, so the change process typically takes on the mountains on its own. That means change process can become a neutral, can become like a smooth flow in terms of the process, in terms of the actual actions that change will take place. So that's actually importance based on action research.